Right now, hidden in the public financial filings of this really obscure Swedish laser company
Yeah.
is basically the blueprint for the next era of consumer health. Yeah, and there's no, theatrical stage or anything.
No.
Just CEO in a turtleneck, just raw math.
Right, raw math that proves the era of the needle prick is, well, it's about to end.
Exactly.
We are looking at a massive technological revolution today, but we aren't waiting for the press release. We have a stack of sources that play out like a high-stakes corporate detective story.
It really does.
Yeah. We are diving into financial disclosures, a highly revealing interview on a Swedish investing podcast, supply chain logistics, and even an official company tweet.
A lot of puzzle pieces.
Definitely. So the mission for today is to connect the dots between an $850 million market cap laser supplier called Sivers Semiconductors and what is heavily rumored to be the next major leap in consumer hardware. Okay, let's unpack this. I find this specific type of analysis incredibly revealing because, in the world of tech hardware, the truth is always buried in the logistics.
Right.
It is buried in unit sales, and it is buried in development timelines. I mean, a massive shift in consumer technology simply cannot happen invisibly.
Yeah, they can't just hide it.
No, exactly. When a multinational corporation wants to manufacture millions of complex new devices, they have to start moving the gears of the global supply chain years in advance.
Wow, years.
Oh, absolutely. They have to secure raw materials, build fabrication plants, and, sign all these contracts. And if you know how to read those years, you can see the future long before anyone steps onto a stage to announce it.
Which is where our very first clue comes in. We need to figure out exactly who this laser supplier, so that's Sivers Semiconductors, trading under the ticker symbol SIVE, right?
That's the one.
We need to figure out who they are actually building components for. And the trail starts with Sivers' own CEO.
Right. He was recently a guest on a Swedish podcast.
Yeah, the Investor's podcast. And during that interview, he dropped a staggering hint. He literally stated that Sivers' very first Fortune 100 customer is looking at an order volume of 50 million units annually. 50 million units of a highly specialized component. We really need to pause and appreciate that scale.
It's massive.
It is. That is not a small pilot program. That's not some, niche medical device being rolled out to a few hospitals. That number represents massive global-scale consumer mass production.
I want to push back on the exclusivity of that number, though, because looking at the chart in our sources detailing selected consumer products and their units sold, there are several directions this could go.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, Lenovo, for example, hit 69 million PC units sold. If a supplier goes on a podcast and says they have a customer looking for 50 billion units, and a PC manufacturer moves roughly that many laptops, isn't that just a closed case? Like, it's a new webcam sensor or a biometric scanner for laptops.
Well, you are overlooking the explicit parameters of the CEO's statement?
Lenovo moves a massive amount of inventory, yeah, but Lenovo is not a Fortune 100 company. Sivers explicitly stated this client is in the Fortune 100.
Ah, okay. I'll give you Lenovo. But Dell is on that list. HP is on that list.
True.
Right? And Dell's PC unit sales hit 50 million in 2022. HP's PT sales hit 55 million. So they fit the Fortune 100 requirement, and they fit the unit math perfectly.
They fit the volume, yeah, but they completely fail the financial logic of hardware integration.
What do you mean?
You have to look at what those volume numbers represent for a PC manufacturer. That 50 or 55 million unit number represents their total aggregate PC sales across their entire fractured catalog.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. We are talking about everything from a bare-bones $200 Chromebook meant for an elementary school student all the way up to a $5,000 ultra-premium gaming rig.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And Sivers is providing a highly specialized, cutting-edge optical laser technology. A PC manufacturer would never take a brand new, expensive premium sensor and put it inside every single unit they sell across every single price tier. It would absolutely destroy their margins on budget devices.
But wait, doesn't Apple have a fragmented lineup too? Like if we are leaning towards smartwatches, Apple sells the budget SE, the standard series watch, and a high-end Ultra.
That's a fair point.
So why would it make financial sense for them to put an expensive new sensor in all their watches, but not for Dell to put one in all their laptops.
Because there is a critical distinction in how Apple handles internal architecture versus a traditional PC manufacturer. Apple relies on unified silicon and sensor architecture to achieve unparalleled economies of scale.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, when they introduce a major new health sensor like the ECG or the blood oxygen monitor, they don't fracture their supply chain by creating 10 different versions of it. They scale the exact same core sensor array across their primary lineup to drive the component cost down.
Oh, wow. So they just put the same tech in almost everything.
Exactly. A PC manufacturer sources thousands of different components from hundreds of vendors to build 100 different SKUs. Apple builds tens of millions of the exact same underlying hardware chassis.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we are looking for a Fortune 100 company that sells a unified consumer product at a volume of roughly 50 million units a year.
Correct.
Let's look at the wearable and mobile tech space on our chart then. Could it be Meta?
Well, MetaQuest sales across all their models from 2019 to 2023 only hit 20 million units total.
Ah, right. And we're looking for 50 million annually.
Yeah, exactly.
What about the Google Pixel?
Across all models from 2016 to 2023, Pixel hit 28 million total.
Fitbit?
Fitbit sold 11 million units in 2021. What's fascinating here is how quickly the math boxes out almost every single massive tech corporation on Earth.
Yeah, it really narrows it down fast.
It does. When you systematically filter the data for a Fortune 100 company moving 50 million highly unified units annually, you are left with an incredibly small pool.
You are left with Apple.
Precisely. Now look at Apple's numbers on the chart. iPhones sold 78 million units in 2022.
That's too high for a 50 million unit order.
Right. And Apple AirPods sold 58 million in 2021. iPads sold 62 million. But the Apple Watch sits right at 40 million units sold in 2021.
40 million in 2021. And, if you are projecting gross for a future product launch a few years down the line, 50 million units is the exact runway you would be planning for.
It's a perfect match.
So the math points heavily to the Apple Watch,
Yeah.
which immediately raises the question of what a Swedish laser supplier is doing inside a smartwatch. The sources mention indium phosphide, or NMP, laser arrays, and silicon photonics.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like something you'd find in a telecom data center, not on a wrist.
It does sound like that, but it is actually one of the most difficult engineering challenges in modern consumer electronics. For years, the holy grail of health technology has been non-invasive optical sensing.
Non-invasive meaning no needles.
Exactly. The goal is to read what is happening chemically inside your body, specifically your interstitial fluid, without ever breaking the skin with a needle.
When I first read about optical sensing, I pictured holding a really strong flashlight right up against your palm in a dark room.
Oh, right, like when you were a kid.
Yeah. You know how the light pushes through the tissue and makes your whole hand glow red from the inside? I assumed it was just a high-tech version of that.
Well, that analogy gets at the basic concept of light penetrating tissue, but it stops short of explaining how data is actually gathered.
Okay, so how does it work?
The light doesn't just need to illuminate the fluid, it needs to act like a highly specific molecular barcode scanner. The scientific mechanism at play here is called optical absorption spectroscopy.
Optical absorption spectroscopy, a molecular barcode scanner. Break that down for us.
Okay, so every molecule in your body, whether it's glucose, lactate, or just water, absorbs very specific wavelengths of light. If you shine a broad spectrum of light into the skin, the glucose molecules in your interstitial fluid will absorb certain frequencies and bounce others back.
I see.
And by analyzing the exact shadow or missing wavelengths in the light that bounces back to the sensor, the device can calculate the exact concentration of that molecule in your fluid.
So why can't we just use the green and red LEDs that are already on the back of smartwatches today?
Because they already track heart rate and blood oxygen, right?
Right, they do. But green and red lights simply do not penetrate deeply enough, nor do they operate at the correct wavelengths to detect complex molecules like glucose in the interstitial fluid.
Oh, they just literally can't reach it.
Exactly. Standard silicon-based LEDs are physically incapable of generating the specific near-infrared wavelengths required for this kind of spectroscopy. And this is where indium phosphide comes in.
The NNP.
Yes, NMP. It's a highly specialized semiconductor material that is exceptional at emitting highly precise, tunable lasers in the near-infrared spectrum. But the sources also mentioned silicon photonics. If indium phosphide is doing the laser work, where does the silicon come in?
That is the genius of the engineering. See, indium phosphide is great at emitting light, but it is incredibly expensive and difficult to manufacture as a computing chip.
Okay.
Silicon, on the other hand, is terrible at emitting light, but it is cheap and perfect for processing complex data.
Ah, so they combine them.
Exactly. Silicon photonics is the bleeding-edge process of bonding microscopic indium phosphide lasers directly onto a silicon computer chip. The laser shoots the light into your wrist, and the silicon chip instantly processes the incredibly complex spectroscopy data bouncing back.
Okay, so Sivers Semiconductor has this microscopic near-infrared molecular barcode scanner,
Yes.
and they have an order for 50 million of them. The next massive piece of the puzzle is the timeline. Like, when is this actually happening?
The timeline is where it all comes together.
Right. So on April 23, 2026, Sivers posted a tweet on the platform X, and it includes a graph that basically serves as a roadmap for how specialized tech manufacturing works.
That tweet is critical.
Yeah, the tweet states, quote, Sivers Semiconductors has several development projects ongoing. The aim is to sell new products in volume once a development project is completed.
This tweet is perhaps the most telling piece of corporate communication we have because it exposes the internal timeline of this mystery project. Let's look at the structure of that graph.
Okay, so the graph has two distinct phases. The horizontal axis is time, and the vertical axis is volume.
Right.
The first phase is a flat, very low volume line that lasts for approximately 1 year, and it's labeled non-recurring engineering sales. The text explains that during this year, Sivers is customizing the technology to match customer requirements.
Non-recurring engineering, or NRE. This is a crucial concept to understand.
NRE.
Having a working silicon photonics chip on a stabilized laboratory bench is one thing. Customizing it to live inside a consumer smartwatch is an entirely different universe of engineering.
Because it has to be out in the real world.
Exactly. During this 1-year NRE phase, Sivers and their mystery Fortune 100 client are trying to solve physical nightmares.
Like what?
Like, how do you dissipate the heat generated by an NMP laser so it doesn't burn the user's wrist?
Oh, wow, yeah, that would be bad.
Right. How do you calibrate the spectrometer to account for different skin tones, varying sweat levels, or arm hair? How do you account for the fact that a wrist is constantly swinging and moving?
So they aren't mass-producing anything yet. They are just building prototypes and solving problems.
Exactly. That is why the volume line is flat. It is pure research and development. But notice what happens immediately after that 1-year mark.
Yeah, the graph enters the second phase, which is labeled hardware sales. And the line just shoots upward exponentially into massive volume. The text says, once completed, the aim is to sell the product in volume.
Now overlay that internal Sivers timeline with the rumors circulating in the broader tech industry. Our sources indicate that rumors heavily point to a debut of this non-invasive optical sensor in the Apple Watch Series 13, and the estimated launch window for the Series 13 is the late second half of 2027.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The timing lines up perfectly. If Sivers tweeted this graph on April 23, 2026, indicating they are currently entering a roughly 1-year NRE phase, that takes them to mid-2027.
1 year of final customization runway starting in early to mid-2026 places the completion of the NRE phase exactly at mid-2027.
It's like clockwork.
It really is. That perfectly positions Sivers to ramp up into that massive exponential spike of hardware sales by mid to late 2027, which is precisely when Apple would need the global supply chain firing on all cylinders to stockpile 50 million units for a late H2 2027 product launch.
So the supplier's own internal production graph matches the rumored Apple Watch timeline down to the fiscal quarter.
Exactly.
Okay, we have the math isolating Apple based on volume. We have the indium phosphide and silicon photonics technology perfectly matching Apple's long-rumored goal of non-invasive spectroscopy.
Yeah.
And we have the 1-year production timeline syncing flawlessly with a late 2027 Series 13 launch. But there is a massive piece of friction here.
The certainty score.
Yeah. The source material includes a confidence rating on this theory. It gives a certainty score of 95 out of 100 that the unnamed Fortune 100 company is Apple. So what does this all mean?
That 5% is important.
Right. If we have the unit math, the timeline, and the technology perfectly aligned, why a 95% certainty? I mean, if Sivers just landed the most lucrative wearable contract of the decade, why won't they just issue a press release, say, we are partnering with Apple, and let their stock price go through the roof?
Well, that 5% deduction in certainty is not a reflection of flawed data. It is a reflection of the legal realities of working with the most secretive technology company on the planet.
The NDAs.
Yes. Apple enforces non-disclosure agreements that are legendary in their severity. The source material spells this out very clearly. A supplier will face literally ruinous lawsuits if they publicly confirm a relationship with Apple before an official product launch.
Ruinous lawsuits. I mean, that implies more than just losing the contract.
It implies corporate annihilation. We are looking at a massive power dynamic imbalance here.
Because Sivers is big, but not Apple big.
Right. Sivers is an $850 million market cap company. That is a solid, successful business. But they are dealing with a corporation valued in the trillions.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Exactly. If Sivers were to leak the details of the Series 13 Apple Watch, Apple wouldn't just pull the 50 million unit order, they would litigate Sivers for breaching confidentiality, seeking damages that would financially destroy the supplier. Sivers legally cannot confirm the client.
Which explains why Sivers CEO used the phrase Fortune 100 customer on that Swedish podcast instead of just saying the name. He was walking right up to the legal line without crossing it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly how modern supply chain intelligence works. Analysts don't wait for a confession because they know the NDAs prevent one.
Right, they look for the clues.
Instead, they look at the footprints that legally have to be disclosed. Public companies have to report capital expenditures. They have to report when they expand their clean rooms. They have to post job listings for photonics engineers.
They can't hide everything.
Exactly. When you aggregate the 50 million unit requirement, the Fortune 100 status, the highly specific NNP laser technology, and the one-year NRE timeline, Apple is the only entity on Earth that fits the exact mathematical, financial, and technological footprint of this project.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because for you, the person listening right now, the immediate thought might be, well, I use an Android phone. I don't care what Apple puts in their watch in 2027.
Sure, a lot of people might think that.
But the implications of this supply chain sleuthing go far beyond one company's ecosystem.
Absolutely. The broader impact relies on what the sources describe as the follower effect in consumer electronics.
The follower effect.
Right. Apple is currently absorbing the massive financial burden of the research and development. They are the ones paying Sivers through that one-year, non-recurring engineering phase to figure out how to stabilize silicon photonics on a moving wrist. Apple is taking the initial risk.
But once Apple proves the manufacturing works at a scale of 50 million units, the entire landscape changes.
Radically. Setting up the supply chain is the hardest part. Once Sivers and the associated foundries are reliably producing tens of millions of these indium phosphide arrays, the cost per component plummets.
Because the infrastructure exists.
Exactly. The infrastructure exists. At that point, the sources explicitly note that competitors like Google, Samsung, and others will inevitably follow suit. The technology becomes democratized.
So even if you never intend to buy an Apple product, this deep dive is a preview of the hardware that will likely be on your wrist by 2028 or 2029. We are looking at the end of finger pricks and needles for everyday health monitoring, driven by the sheer scale of Apple's supply chain dragging the rest of the industry forward.
The transition from taking isolated, painful blood samples to having continuous, non-invasive optical health tracking is one of the most profound medical shifts we will see in consumer hardware.
It's going to change everything.
It really is. And the evidence that it is finally happening isn't on a billboard. It's in the math of a 50 million unit order.
Let's quickly recap the journey we just took. We started with a cryptic hint dropped on a Swedish podcast. We used hard sales data to debate the logistics of PC manufacturing versus unified wearable architecture, proving that only Apple's scale fits the 50 million unit math.
Right.
We explored the physics of optical absorption spectroscopy and why indium phosphide is required to read your interstitial fluid. We tracked a tweet from Sivers in April 2026 showing a one-year development runway that perfectly targets a late 2027 product launch. And we uncovered how the reality of ruinous NDAs keeps this massive leap in technology officially a secret.
It's quite the puzzle.
It is. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We love tackling these puzzles with you, pulling apart the data to understand the mechanisms driving the future.
The mechanical puzzle of how this technology reaches the market is solved. But as we approach this late 2027 launch, it leaves a much larger question in its wake. If a smart device can soon shine a near-infrared light through our skin to accurately read our internal biological fluids without a single needle prick, what happens when this kind of continuous, microscopic biological data is being collected passively every single second of our lives?